New Growth Group, which is the third-party evaluation team working on this grant. I have on the phone with me Mike Leach, who is our project manager, and Brian Schmatzer, who's our statistician. And we have put together a little slide presentation so we can introduce the evaluation requirement and go through and have a little bit of a discussion about what it is that we'll be asking you to help us with, and what you can expect from us over the next few years. With any luck, this PowerPoint will cooperate. Okay, so I'm just very briefly going to kick the conversation off, and then I'm going to kick it over to Mike Leach. And Mike, you'd asked if we could go around the room and do a little bit of an introduction, right, so we could get a sense of who is there.
Yeah, and
Courtney?
That's a great idea, because we haven't done that yet here, so it'll be good for everyone. So we'll just start on this side of the room. I think everyone knows me. I'm Courtney Breckenridge, and I'm the project manager for the consortium. Okay, I'm Wendy O'Toole, and I'm a grad assistant. I work with Courtney in the presentation department. I am Tina Russell, and I'm from Lewis and Clark Community College.
I'm Steve Foster, College, and I'm the project manager.
I'm John Elder. I'm from Carl Sandburg College, and full description of my title is data manager / coordinator of statistical accounting. I'm Kyle Seafawn, Carl Sandburg College, Dean of Career and Corporate Development.
I'm Karen Weiss. I'm with SIC, Southeastern Illinois College, and I'm the Career and Technical Education.
Renee Leshy, Southeastern Illinois College, Director of Curriculum Training.
Diana Keating, Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs. I do the administrative work for the grant, Southeastern.
Benjamin Ross, the project coordinator at Southeastern Illinois College.
Judy Josiah, Vice President, Workforce Development and Community Education at Lincoln College.
Julie Rohr, Director of Workforce Development at Lincoln Community College.
I'm Terry Bucker, the project support specialist at Lewis and Clark Community College.
Sue Twinsky, Dean at Community College. Lewis and Clark, sorry. All community college.
That can happen.
I will take care of it. We've got a construction this door, apparently. I'm gonna take care of that right now. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'm not sure I heard everybody. If you all are having trouble hearing us, you'll have to let us know so we can speak up or something. I think I heard some.
Chris, this is
Can you hear
Renee. Please do everything you can to bring the volume up. We've got one iPhone in the middle of a 22-foot table. So if you could bring the volume up as much as you can and lean in as close as you can, I think we'll be fine.
Okay, I'm putting my mouth on the phone. And
You got it. Thank you.
I had a giant garlic sandwich for breakfast. I think I heard some names in the room. So hello to the people that I know and to the people that I haven't met yet. I look forward to meeting you. Let me just give you a little bit of background on New Growth. We are an urban and regional planning firm that specializes in education and workforce. We basically do two kinds of projects. One is strategic planning, and then the other is analytics and evaluation. We're deeply involved in TAACCCT evaluations. We have a total of 9 TAACCCT evaluations, and so we're very familiar with the requirements of the grant and have been through several project cycles with other grantees all over the country. We're a small team. We have a team of 8, and 3 of us are on the phone here this morning. We have a slide a little bit later in the presentation that lists some of our other team members that are on the phone this morning. I think one other detail in terms of introducing the team is that on this project we're partnering with the University of Illinois. That we have an individual, her name is Sally Greenberg, who is going to be involved in the qualitative side of the evaluation. You may hear from her for the purposes of interviews or other types of qualitative work. U of I is a sub to us on this project, and I think that's basically it. Mike or Brian, are there other things in terms of introducing the team?
Yep.
No? Okay.
Greenberg.
Thank you.
Our style is to be very communicative. We do think that we can bring a lot of structure to this project based on our experience with other tax grants, and so you'll see as we go through this, we have templates and data forms and intake forms and other materials that we can bring as well as an evaluation methodology. But by no means do we think that we have all the answers. And so, and nor do we think that we're the perfect communicators. And so we prefer to have open lines of communication with all of you as we kind of tinker with our evaluation approach moving forward. We may need to reach out to you, ask some questions, make sure we're moving in the right direction with some of our thinking. And similarly, if we're not being clear, if you're feeling a need to reach out to us, the lines of communication are open for sure, and you should just feel free to send an email or pick up the phone and give us a call anytime you want. Even if it's a small question, just give us a call. Generally speaking, or just in terms of a broad introduction, the Department of Labor requires a third-party entity to do an evaluation of your project. We're not auditors. We're not in the business of measuring whether or not you're being compliant for DOL purposes. It's our job to try to assess the impact on participants from this grant project, and so you'll see our methodologies and our data collection efforts are aimed at that. We'll not be, in the weeds or in your business in terms of looking at your finances or really anything that has to do with compliance. So I'd like to state that up front because I think it's a good clarification of our role. We are also helping Courtney to collect participant data for the purposes of reporting on the annual performance report. Our data templates, in addition to gathering the data that we'll need for measuring impact, they also have the data fields built into them that will enable this consortium to submit its annual performance report, which basically does the bean counting for the project to the Department of Labor. So that's another role that we have. Broadly speaking, the evaluation is made up of 2 parts. There is what's called an implementation evaluation, which is intended to document the project. What we'll want is information on whether or not the programs, the processes, the mechanisms that you're implementing in the project, which are all pointed at driving the grant outcomes of the project. We'll want details on those, and we'll be asking questions that'll help us capture whether or not the project is being implemented as you've intended it or as you've articulated it in the grant proposal. Invariably, projects always deviate from what's intended, and so if there are storylines that come up that you decided to go in a different direction or not do this and add that, and changes occur and the project evolves, that's fine with us. Like I said, we're not in the business of auditing. We're in the business of trying to tell the story of the project, and so we want to hear your rationales for why things changed, et cetera. So the implementation evaluation is part one, and then part two is the impact evaluation. That's the data side, and we'll get into it a little more, but we have some quasi-experimental methodology where we'll look to collect participant data and then compare it to a comparison group to get a sense of relative outcomes. And I think that's the overview. I don't want to take up too much time. I am going to also talk about some next steps as we get farther into this, but for right now, I'm going to kick it over to Mike, who is going to start us off by describing the implementation evaluation. So go ahead, Mike.
And Courtney, can you all hear me pretty well? I'm trying to speak loud and talk into my phone here.
I think so.
We're good?
Yes.
All right, so good morning, everyone. My name's Mike Leach, and I'm going to be the project manager for this evaluation. And like Chris said, I look forward to meeting all of you hopefully soon. We were in Illinois a couple weeks ago, Chris and I were, and got the chance to meet Courtney, but I'm sure we'll be back before too long and hopefully have a chance to meet all of you. So as Chris said, there's a team of us at New Growth that are going to be actually working on the evaluation, but I'm going to be the lead contact for Courtney and you all. But of course I'll have access to Chris, who will be working with us, and then Brian, as well as Nikki and some others at New Growth who will be part of the team working on the evaluation. So this next slide is just to walk you through how the steps that we've sort of gone through to organize the evaluation. And so we started with logic models essentially, and you probably know what logic models are, but and I'm going to show you a couple here in just a minute for your project. But this is where we've sort of linked the grant activities that you all will be doing to various outcomes, intermediate outcomes, long-term outcomes. And so it's sort of the logical flow of what you're doing to produce the outcomes that you said you would produce. And so from the logic models, we then developed evaluation questions. You know, what are the primary questions we want to answer with this evaluation? Of course, we want to provide DOL with the information they're asking for in terms of major outcomes, but there's other questions that we obviously want to ask in terms of, you know, what has been done, what seems to be working well, those kinds of things. And I don't know if Courtney shared it with you, but we actually put together the logic models and the evaluation questions in what was called a detailed evaluation plan, and we had to submit that to the Department of Labor. And so we've done that. And Courtney, it might be helpful if you haven't shared that with the folks to share that. I think it would obviously provide some more detail on the things that I'm talking about and how the evaluation is going to go. So once we've had our evaluation questions, and of course we can add other questions as we go along too. What we've done to this point isn't final. We're now in the process of developing what we call inquiry plans and data plans, or actually a data plan, I should say. Now the inquiry plans are basically the implementation evaluation, the questions we'll be looking at, and the process of gathering information, interviews, site visits, those kinds of things. That piece hasn't been developed yet. We're going to be working on that over the coming weeks with Chris and Courtney, and you guys will probably have some input as well. The data plan has been complete, and I think Courtney has given you a copy of that. That is more about how you guys are going to collect data on campus and sort of the timeline for collecting data, and that's the data plan is all about the impact evaluation, and Chris is going to spend the latter part of this webinar going over in detail the impact evaluation. So that piece is pretty finished. Again, the inquiry plan is, we're just developing that, and that's more about the implementation evaluation and trying to find out what it is you guys have actually done and how things are going. So you see the little arrow there where it says we are here. We've actually done some other things to sort of build the infrastructure for the evaluation. We've put together what we call data templates, and I think Courtney has provided copies of the data templates for you guys. These are essentially the templates that you all will be using at your college to put data in to send to new growth. And again, the data templates are really more about the impact evaluation. And then just in terms of next steps, we're going to start collecting data this fall. I hope that's not a shock to anybody. Presumably it's not. I think, with most of these TAACCCT grants, the first year is planning and getting organized, and then the second year typically is when you implement and start tracking outcomes and have participants. So hopefully we'll have participants in the fall, and we'll start collecting data on them, and then from there we'll transition into the ongoing evaluation activities, and we'll be explaining more about those as the webinar goes along. Go ahead and flip it, Chris. So the implementation evaluation, there's several pieces to this. I don't think any of this is going to be a surprise to any of you all, and this is more the qualitative piece of the evaluation. And we're going to be utilizing site visits, interviews, questionnaires, various methods to sort of gather information for the implementation evaluation. And as I just said, we haven't developed that plan of inquiry yet. We're going to be working on that over the coming weeks and working with Courtney, and hopefully have some input from you guys as well. But we'll be looking at, what are the mechanisms driving the outcomes? So what's working well? What's not working well? Why are certain things working well and other things not working well? One of the things we're going to spend quite a bit of time doing is documenting the approaches that each college has taken. And as Chris said, there's going to be variation in what you all do, and we recognize that. But we really need to document what it is you have done, and then try and make some connections between what it is you're doing and the outcomes that you're achieving, and try and figure out what things are driving impacts and what things might not be driving impacts, and what are the reasons behind those sort of dynamics. And then continuous improvement is always a part of any evaluation. As we gather this information and folks might be struggling with things, that information will be brought to Courtney's attention, and the consortium can potentially do some things to address those issues if there's common struggles. Perhaps the consortium can rally around those issues and figure out ways to help each other to get through those things. And then, the last part of what the implementation evaluation is about is moving your student success agenda forward. Presumably this TAACCCT grant is intended for you guys to try some things to improve outcomes for students, and you're going to want to know what's driving outcomes well and what's not. And then you have some idea of what are the things you might want to replicate or scale up or build on further that are having an impact on students and outcomes for students. So it's hopefully the evaluation will help you identify those things that you might want to keep building on and pushing as a consortium or as a college to improve outcomes for students. So logic models, I mentioned these earlier. I'm not going to go into detail about these, but you'll sort of see the things that you said you were going to do in the model column there. And so, for instance, under prior learning assessment, the input there is that you know, as a consortium, you guys have decided that prior learning assessment is not being done as fully as it could be. And so your approach to dealing with that is, you know, working with CAIL to sort of standardize the process for doing prior learning assessment and trying to get it more prevalent across your campuses. So short-term outcomes are going to be trainings with CAIL, more standardized prior learning assessment practices. Hopefully that's going to lead to more prior learning assessment credit being awarded for students, and then hopefully in the long term students will reduce time to degree and increase completion rates. So that's just an example of sort of, you know, the logic model and how it plays out in terms of outcomes, and trying to link that back to what you guys said you were going to do.
And Mike, can I just add one other thing?
Sure.
When the logic models are a way for us to organize the evaluation, and so we basically picked apart the proposal and made sure we understand, you know, in the input column, for example, what problem are you trying to solve? What did you say you were going to do about it? What are some of the short-term things that we ought to see coming online that would provide evidence that those things are happening? The intermediate term outcome for us is where we would think we would see something in the student data, and then we wanted to connect it to a long-term outcome. Some of the longer-term vision I would expect we won't see in the grant period. We're very cognizant to not hold you all accountable for things that are not in the proposal. And so what you're seeing in these charts is a language that's in the proposal. We've not added anything. We've not added anything to it. Okay, Mike, that was my point.
Good. That's helpful. I'm sure they're glad to know that we haven't added anything to what they're supposed to be doing.
Thank you.
As you can see from this slide, you guys have committed to doing quite a bit, which is fantastic. But this slide captures, I think, the bulk of your activities under this grant. If you look under the model column, you can see the things like hands-on learning, internships, competency-based learning, career pathways, enhancing your online instruction through gaming and simulations, student supports, working with the WIBs, open enrollment, all of those things that you've committed to doing. And, you know, those activities in large part are then driving your outcomes for this grant. So if you look at the intermediate term outcomes there, you can see all the numbers that you put in your proposal in terms of participants and outcomes and credits earned and all of those things, which we have to report to DOL. All right, next slide. And this is the logic model then for your employer engagement piece. And hopefully you'll be working with Corporation for Skilled Workforce or somebody similar that has experience in this realm. But as you guys know, this piece is critical too, because it drives a lot of what you're trying to do through strategies 2, 3, and 4. You know how it works. If the employers have input on competencies needed and career pathways that make sense, and all of these things that we've said we're going to do. So we're going to look at that piece too through the implementation evaluation and how the employer engagement is going and what impact it's having on outcomes. And so this next slide is just a sort of a summary of the key impact evaluation questions that we'll be looking at. So again, what's being implemented, what has each college implemented, and how is that driving impact, the impacts that we're seeing. We're going to be looking at, has implementation occurred on time and as intended? And hopefully that's the case. Is there fidelity to the model? In other words, are you doing in large part what you said you were going to do? And again, as Chris has said, and we recognize that there's going to be a lot of variance in how you guys do these different pieces. And not everybody's going to be doing the same thing, and perhaps not everybody's going to be doing all of these things. And that's I think that's just part of how these consortium grants go. And colleges have their own needs and strengths, and that's understandable. So there will be variance in what each of you do, but we're still going to try and figure out what each of you are doing and what it is that you're doing in particular that's driving impacts the most. And that's really what the implementation evaluation is all about. So we'll be looking at factors that are enabling or hindering the outcomes we're trying to achieve. And then, we'll have opportunities to look at each particular grant strategy, whether it's prior learning assessment, redesigned developmental education, enhanced online learning. Any of those strategies within the grant we'll have an opportunity to look at in more depth, and answer some questions you guys might want to have answered as well. I mean, one of the things about the implementation evaluation is it is ongoing and it's somewhat fluid, and we're to come up with a plan for how we want to approach this. But as we get into this, that plan could change, and you all may want to take this in different directions in terms of exploring things and learning things, and we're certainly open to doing that. So, Chris, I think there's one more slide, the timeline. So we'll be, with the implementation evaluation, we're going to be beginning to look at the planning that you all have done and the plans that you've put in place for what you're going to do. And we'll start looking at that planning stage this fall through interviews, questionnaires. We haven't developed all that yet, but that's going to start this fall. Then in the spring, the plan is to start looking at how early implementation is going. And then from there, we'll get into later stage implementation. And, one of the things I will say is we've been involved with a lot of TAACCCT grants at New Growth, and as Chris is going to now talk about the quantitative data that we need and how we can make sure that data is reported to DOL. But we're going to try and make a link between the outcomes that we're seeing in the quantitative data, make a link back to what's actually being done at the colleges, and again, trying to figure out through the implementation evaluation what things might be driving those particular outcomes. So it's a coordinated effort. So Chris, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so on the data part of the evaluation, which we in DOL parlance is called the impact evaluation, essentially we're looking at grant outcomes based on student data that we're going to collect from you. The goal is to assess the effectiveness of the grant activities. Is somebody trying to say something?
Interrupt you for a second?
We have a quick question in here.
My apologies. I have a quick question. So with the impact evaluation, I'm sorry, not the impact evaluation, the inquiry evaluation, what sort of analyses are we thinking about using in order to say specifically that one practice at one school is significantly impacting the result? What are that's going to be used?
Yeah, so we are, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, a lot of this comes down to, starting with what we see in the data. And so we're going to talk about the data plan here. As we start to get a sense of whether or not it seems like certain colleges are being particularly impactful or struggling with their work, that will give us some areas of interest that we may want to delve into in particular. And also, as a part of that, and in our data plan, we'll be collecting data on the different strategies. And so some colleges might do PLA, for example. Others might be devoting more time and energy to online or to DevEd. And so we're going to want to be capturing information from all of you, data on which aspects of the grant you're pursuing, and then getting a sense of whether or not those things are having an impact on student outcomes, meaning things like retention, completion, and then the transition into employment. That type of data collection is going to occur in parallel with the qualitative. The qualitative, basically what we've been able to accomplish in past TAACCCT grants, it's a lot of storytelling. One of the challenges that we have in these grants is that there's so much variation, and if we really wanted to determine causality, the evaluations would probably need to collect an awful lot more data than what they're able to collect. And so as we get a sense of the impact, and again, the employing the quasi-experimental methodology, we'll also be collecting information on the qualitative side on what you're doing. What are the factors that you all think have been particularly good or bad or gotten in the way or been enabling factors, along with some of the descriptive information about what the details of your particular projects are. And in terms of the connection between the implementation and the impact evaluation, it often occurs in sort of like a story time explanation in the reports that we write. It is, in some cases, I think, relatively easy to kind of triangulate in such a way that you can assign impacts to a particular grant strategy, but in other cases it's not. And so that's when the story time becomes important. And as we're looking to construct the storyline for the project, we offer our observations, but in some cases we may look to you to help us co-construct that. And so if you're feeling like there are things that were particularly impactful or things that got in the way, these are parts of the story that we would want to get included into the way we write this up.
And Chris, let me just add, obviously we can't, we're not going to be doing regression analysis to try and figure out what variables are having the biggest impact on outcomes. But it's more going to be like Chris said.
We do regression analysis.
Right, but we're not going to be doing that for this project. But it's more about some of it will be intuitive. If for instance a particular program at a particular college is seeing immense enrollment increases, and you guys that college is implementing the rolling enrollment practice, there could be a pretty easy link made between that particular activity and practice and what's driving that outcome of enrollment. And those are going to be more of the things that we're going to be able to point out through the sort of linking of the impact evaluation data and the implementation qualitative data that we're gathering. But that is a good question. It's difficult to do, and we won't be doing a bunch of regression analysis to sort of sort through all that.
And just, Mike, just to clarify, we are going to be doing a regression analysis. We have a matching methodology we have an approach that Brian will use to establish comparability between a comparison group and a participant group, and he'll test out different models of regression to determine whether or not factors such as demographics or participation in certain programs versus others seem as if they're having more impact in the analysis relative to students that aren't represented in the data in the same way. It's not entirely clear whether or not the regression analyses are going to show us anything. and so he'll test out a variety of different approaches for trying to get a sense of impact, and we'll go as far as we can in terms of being able to attribute student outcomes to different aspects of the project. And we're being as thoughtful as we can at the front end in terms of setting up this data plan so it will produce something fruitful at the end. Of course, we can't make any guarantees about what we're going to see in the data. But yeah, there will be, and he on occasion has used other methodologies aside from regressions, propensity scores, for example. But the intent is to get as rigorous as we can, and you know, as we look to interpret the results, we use the information we've collected in the implementation evaluation, and we'll also look to you all, the colleges, to help us understand what we're seeing in the data. Okay, I got to move us along.
We have one additional question.
I have a question
Okay.
for you. Can you hear me?
I can.
You cannot?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, most people can hear me. I have one of those voices. Since the tax grant from the very beginning of round one is a matter of public record, may we see some of the reports that you have developed on the other 9 projects so that we can have an idea of how you started, what it looked like, and what the outcome was? Personally, that would help us a great deal at Southeastern.
Yes and no. Yes, we are very open to sharing as much information and products. We're open to sharing all of it. The round 1 report is being completed this fall, and so this is the first round of report that we're actually going to have for a tax grant. The way that the tax the rounds of tax have kind of evolved a little bit with each successive round. There was no evaluation requirement in round 1.
We're round 1.
So you have a round 1?
Round 1, so I understand where you're at.
Yeah.
And I got but if we could see those reports in the fall, or some form of them, it doesn't even have to be complete, it would be quite valuable.
Yeah, you bet. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I want to get to some of the details of that I think are most relevant to you all. So we have a set of evaluation questions associated with the impact evaluation. If you look on the left side of the slide, you can see kind of what the core of the questions are. We have questions around completions, retention, credit attainment, credentials earned, and then some employment outcomes. These questions are basically mapped to the Department of Labor requirements. And so for those of you that have been involved in tax grants previously, these will look very familiar. We've added 2 additional evaluation questions based on our read of the grant. And one has to do with time to completion, and then the other has to do with the geographic range of participants served. There's some language in the proposal around online learning and looking to increase access, and so we added that one. I want to get into the definition of participants, and so what you see on the slide in front of you is a reflection of Department of Labor's definition. Essentially, participants are defined as adults, meaning over the age of 18, who during the grant period declare for a grant-affected program or take a core course in a grant-affected program. And we have some processes. We have a worksheet we have some materials that will roll out basically at the conclusion of this, or right after the webinar, where we, one of them is a worksheet where we're going to ask you to define for us how you're thinking of your participants locally. You know, I think that you all have an idea already of what your grant-affected programs are. We'll also want some information on your core courses for those programs. What will accompany the worksheet is a longer guidance memo that goes into more detail on what a core course is, what a grant-affected program is, and additional information about the definition of participants. We also have a need to collect data on comparison people. It's a similar definition, and I will have some of the folks on my team reaching out to you to work one-on-one with your colleges to try to define a sensible comparison group. We basically look for two options. One is parallel, what we call a parallel comparison, which means a similar program that's operating during the same time frame, in other words, the grant period. If that's not sensible, then historical comparison is another option. You know, an example of that would be the same program, but from the period prior, before the grant was implemented. We recognize that there's no one-size-fits-all for this, and so I typically ask my data team to reach out to project managers to just have a conversation about what a sensible approach is, and then we define the comparison group for your college and look to lock it down. This is, I mentioned the program worksheet around this is what we use around the definition of participants and comparison groups. This is a screenshot of basically what it looks like. We'll want to work with you to fill in the worksheet. We'll ask you for your program, some details about the program, and then a list of core courses. Again, we use this for our purposes in helping to define our program and comparison groups. So look for this from us. We have an intake form also. The intake form that we've developed is modeled after the Myrtle grant, which is led by Lewis and Clark. This, again, is a screenshot. We will be distributing this. This is not the whole thing. It's just the top part of it. We'll be distributing this right after this. One thing I would note is that for the purposes of the DOL audit and also for data collection, the idea is that everybody who's a participant would fill out a participant intake form. And then we also have data templates. I think we didn't include the data we didn't include screenshots of the data templates, but picture an Excel spreadsheet that has a lot of data fields. We have 3 data templates. One is the participant intake form template that looks to take the fields that are on the intake form and basically put them into a spreadsheet. We also have a one-time template, which is data that remains the same for each individual. For example, their name or their race, that doesn't change, and so we only need to collect it one time, hence the name of the template. And then there's ongoing data, and this includes fields that or information that changes over time. So as an individual completes courses, earns more credits, completes credentials, in some cases changes programs. The ongoing template is where we ask for the update on what's happening to the student. And all 3 of them work together. What we do on our end is we create a database that includes all of the fields, and that gives us the full picture of who the participants are, what their one-time data is, and then we input the update via the ongoing template following each academic term. And then we run analyses at 2 points in time. One is at the midpoint. It will likely, because of the sometimes TAACCCT grants and the funding approvals are, the timelines are, the enrollment of participants sometimes is takes a little while before it starts to happen. So we typically do the midterm analysis around the beginning of the third year of the grant, and then the final analysis, which is where you'll get the full data analysis, will occur at the end of the fourth year. So the period of performance of the grant, in other words, when you all are serving students under the grant, that's only 3 years long, but we get the additional fourth year to deal with data lags and data collection. And so it's towards the end of the fourth year is when we produce the final report. Is this everything that I just said? Okay, so in terms of timeline, we will look to receive data twice a year. Once in the fall, shortly after Census Day, so mid-September, for data pertaining to the spring and the summer semesters. And then in the spring semester, typically in early February, and in our guidance memo that will accompany our materials, we'll have the dates. The spring submission is for data pertaining to the preceding fall semester. There's only one report that's due to the Department of Labor that includes any numbers, and that's due in mid-November. It's called the Annual Performance Report, and it's basically the bean counting. It's where Courtney is responsible for reporting on the enrollments, completions, a variety of, and some demographics, a variety of stats related to just the participants. We're providing the numbers to Courtney, and Courtney's uploading those to the Department of Labor. It's the fall semester report or the fall semester data that you all provide to us is it's the last data that we'll receive from you before we assemble the APR and give it to Courtney. I'll just do some next steps and then I'll open the floor for questions. We are going to need to engage in data sharing agreements with each of your institutions. One of the so one of the things that we do is we ask for Social Security numbers regarding participants. It's on the intake form, and I think it shows up again in the one-time. The reason for that is it's the linking variable that we use with the state UI wage records to be able to pull the students or query the students' employment outcomes, and the social is needed for that. And we're very aware that this is sensitive, confidential, and there's in some cases uneasiness with supplying Social Security numbers to a third party. And so we're accustomed to engaging in legal agreements with the colleges to govern the sharing of that data. If there is a requirement at your institution to go through an institutional research board, an IRB, then we will also engage with you to make sure that that the project is approved at your local college. If there's not a need to do it, then we don't want to make work, and so we don't want to do it if you don't need to do it. But if there is a policy, a need for it, then we help with that. And then you should look you should look for our various forms and to start hearing from our evaluation team here in the near future, especially around that program worksheet. Also included in this, and I'm recording this, and a copy of this will be provided. Here, this is all of our contact information. We're all located in Cleveland with the exception of Mike. Mike is in Little Rock. The number at the bottom, the 216 number, that's our number here at the office. And then Mike's number is included under his name. I think that's it. Yeah. Okay, questions?
Any questions from anyone here?
When we talk about the comparison group, what sort of controls are we putting on them? Are there controls for like comparisons between course content along with the instructor, along with time class occurred? Are we using like yoked comparison samples like that?
We tend to use program as our dominant construct for defining comparison groups. Our preference is to try to find individuals who are receiving as similar a treatment as possible as the grant participants, but aren't grant participants. And in some cases, that's very challenging. You know, if, for example, the program that you're administering at your college is new and there's no historical basis for comparison, and there are no programs that bear any resemblance to the program that you're offering, in that type of situation, we may turn to something like, you know, program duration and demographics to establish at least something that resembles, you know, some sort of a reasonable or, you know, some kind of a rationale for comparison. One question that we ask is, if the students that are in your program did not have the opportunity to enroll in your program, what program do you think they would enroll in, or might they enroll in plausibly? And that's kind of it's a discussion for sure, but it's a guideline that we have found to be kind of useful in figuring out some kind of a sensible approach. It's kind of a long-winded answer, but the reason we like to work with the colleges one-on-one is there are so many different directions that the comparison group could go, and we want to be able to take advantage of all of your thoughtfulness in helping us figure out the best comparison group.
All right, thank you.
I think that's all of the questions for now. You mentioned you're going to send the recorded copies of the video. I know one of the next steps will be bringing the institutional research person or staff at each school into contact with you to assist with the data collection. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. You're going to start getting materials from us. We're going to call, especially the data templates, we'll call draft. The last thing we want to do is give you a data field that's impossible to collect, and so there's some dialing in that will need to happen, and in some cases, the best people to communicate with are the institutional researchers, because they're the ones that in some cases know what's easy to get out of the database versus what's a pain. So yeah, we will be providing our materials, and look for emails and phone calls from us as we work to dial in on the definition of participants and comparison group members. And one of the things we may ask you is to help connect us to your institutional research office.
Well, I know that's very cool.
Yeah, I think we would can you hear me, Courtney?
I can, yes.
I think what we talked about with Courtney was having the folks there in the room, if they're not IR people, institutional research people, taking the webinar back and sharing it with their folks who will be pulling that data on students and you know, the primary outcomes that we're looking at. Share the webinar with those folks and even look at the data templates that we've provided and give us feedback, you know, from those folks, because they're obviously going to be a key piece of getting the accurate data over to us so we can do the work that we need to do. And I'm assuming that most of the folks in the room, I couldn't hear everyone's title, but I don't think anybody is in the IR office, but maybe some of you are or have connections there. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to share this webinar and the data templates with those folks so we can get some feedback from them as well.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction today. I'm certain that if everyone gets detailed evaluation plan from me and digs in, there will be questions in the future. We've talked about follow-up webinars, but I think that was a nice introduction today, and appreciate you bearing with us through our technical difficulties too. So.
Well, thanks everybody, and our phone lines are open, so give us a call if you want to talk about anything.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.